Good morning, Year 6. I hope you're all okay. Um, Welcome to your Tuesday English lesson that's all based around suspense writing. Now, what we're going to do over the next week or so is we're going to do a full unit on suspense writing. This is going to build on quite nicely from some of the work you did to do with the winter settings last time, and also relates to the reading lesson we did yesterday, all about Malamander, which now, and then we kick off into our new unit. And what we're going to do is we're going to build it up until we produce our own piece of extended suspense writing. I think you'll really enjoy this unit because it's just a really fun way to write. The idea that you're trying to create tension and suspense through your story. We're going to start off the unit as we would in school with an explore as a reader session. And what we'll be doing is looking at different extracts and exploring why they're so effective at creating suspense. And first of all, to kick us off, we've got two questions on there. And we're going to hear the phrase tension and suspense a lot through this unit. So I want you to pause the video in a second and have a go at answering the question, what is tension? And by that I mean within writing. What do we mean by tension within writing? Pause the video, have a think, maybe write down what you think the answer is in your book. Have a go. Okay, so what do you think tension is? Well, and when we think about writing, what tension is, well, tension means feeling worry, fear, nerves, or pressure. You can also create tension between characters if they argue. So when we're talking about tension in writing, what we want to do is create a little bit of worry and a little bit of fear or pressure in our writing. Second question, again, you can pause the video and note down your answer in your book. What do you think we mean by suspense? Okay, pause the video now, have a go. Okay, so what do we mean by suspense? Well, we've referred to the word suspense a lot already. We referred to it a lot during our winter nightmare setting description. And what suspense actually is suspense is something used in stories to make them mysterious or scary. Suspense means waiting for something to happen or being uncertain about what will happen. So a lot of suspense, what's to do with, is not giving away all the answers, instead trying to build it all up. Okay, so tension and suspense very closely related in what they mean, and they're two words that we'll be using all the way through this unit of work. Right, what we're going to do first of all is we're going to look at a mini extract from a book called The Curse of Cogston House. Now, the extract is written out here, okay, but I've removed all of the tension and all of the suspense from the story, and it says Alice couldn't move and she was scared. Then a man started to walk down the stairs towards her. That isn't a very good example. In fact, it's what we call a wabble. That is not a very good example of building suspense and tension. And it actually says in this box here, this isn't very scary because we know exactly who is coming down the stairs straight away. The descriptions are not detailed, so although we know that Alice is scared, we don't feel scared with her. There's no detail to these descriptions, and it tells us as readers what's happening. So that's a really poor example of suspense. Now we're going to look at the extract of The Curse of Cogston House now, the correct extract. And here is a much better example of suspense writing. So I'm going to read this extract to you, and hopefully you'll agree it's a really, really high quality example of how to create suspense in a story. So it says, nothing moved. Cogston House was as silent as the grave. Perhaps the only thing worse than hearing her best friend desperately calling her name was being alone in this endless quiet. Alice's eyes searched through the darkness, scouring the corridor, which faded into more murky gloom. She could make out the hallway right in front of her, the door opposite and beyond it, the enormous winding staircase. As she looked, blinking through the tears which had begun to stream hopelessly down her face, she was met with a sight at the top of the staircase, which all but turned her to stone. Something was moving. Alice watched numbly. Her heart was in her mouth, and her breath came in sharp, rattling gasps. Descending the stairs, one careful, agonizing, creaking step at a time, a hunched, silhouette shuffled out from the darkness. Now that's a really, really good example of suspense writing. And what it says here on the side is, even though there is not much happening to this character Alice, there is lots of descriptive detail about the surroundings. All of the writing means that the reader can clearly picture what Alice is experiencing, and they have to wait a long time before they find out what happens to her. Even at the end of the extract, the reader still doesn't know what's coming down the stairs. Keeping some things hidden makes the reader want to keep on reading to find out more. So if you compare that to that first wabble, you can see here, by adding in the extra descriptive detail and by not giving away all the answers, we've created a much more effective version of suspense. What we're going to do in this lesson now is I'm going to take you through some of the features of suspense writing, which will be our key success for the whole unit. So this, when we go through our unit of writing, we're going to refer to all these things all the way through. So one of the things that's used in this writing that we talked about a lot is short, sharp sentences for effect. And the text uses short, sharp sentences to shock the reader. In these short sentences, giving the reader no details at all is scary, a bit like being in the dark. So we've got one there that I've just put in blue. Something was moving. It's very vague, it doesn't tell you very much, and it's very short and sharp and shocking. So when I'm reading that, it sort of makes me think, well, what is it? And also it's so short and sharp that it makes me stand up on edge. Even the first line where it says nothing moved, again, it has that impact. So those short, sharp sentences are really useful in suspense writing. That's one of our key features. Alongside that, another really important feature is to use longer, more detailed sentences for effect. So this is the idea of varying your sentence length. So we've talked about using short, sharp sentences, but we also need to use longer ones as well. So we need to add extra detail to certain sentences, perhaps through subordinate or relative clauses, to vary the sentence length and make the reader wait even longer. And I've just put in blue there two really good examples of longer sentences using subordinate or relative clauses. And it says here, subordinate clause at the start using the subordinate conjunction as she looked, blinking through the tears which had begun to stream hopelessly down her face, she was met with a sight at the top of the staircase, which all but turned her to stone. So that's a multi-clause sentence, which is a lot longer, which then goes into that shorter, sharper sentence that says something was moving. So varying that sentence length is really important. Here's another sentence which starts with the verb descending. Descending the stairs, one careful, agonizing, creaking step at a time, a hunched silhouette shuffled out from the darkness. So it's important when we write our suspense writing that we vary our sentence length effectively. Some sentences with lots of detail, perhaps using subordinate conjunctions or relative clauses, such as which had begun to stream hopelessly down her face or which all but turned her to stone. But by adding these extra clauses in, we can vary the sentence length effectively. Okay, there's three of the features that we've looked at so far. Another really effective way to write effective suspense writing is the use of punctuation. Now, we talk a lot in Year 6 about using advanced punctuation such as semicolons and dashes, etc. And those are still very important. You can use those skills. You're very adept at using those skills, and we'd encourage you to. But in particular to suspense writing, the use of what we call an ellipsis is really effective at creating a little mini pause in the writing. And it says here there is a special type of punctuation you can use in suspense writing. 3 dots together is called an ellipsis. Ellipses show that something is coming next, a bit like a drum roll, or sometimes that something at the end of the sentence is missing. So in both of these sentences here, these are actually those longer sentences, they finish with an ellipse, and it makes you pause as a reader, and it also shows you that something's about to happen. So it goes ... something was moving. Okay, and here at the end here, descending the stairs, one careful, agonizing, creaking step at a time, a hunched silhouette shuffled out from the darkness ... And it doesn't give away the answer. Whereas in the first extract it said a man was coming. So it told you the answer, and it wasn't as effective at creating suspense. So again, without overusing ellipses, They are a really useful tool for you in your writing, but try not to overuse them. Another really effective feature of suspense writing that we want to use is what we call show, not tell. So reading this, I can tell that Alice is scared, but the author never directly says this. So how do we know she is scared? There's lots of clues in the text that tell us they're scared. So what I want you to do now, give you some thinking time, is I want you to pause the video in a second. And we know Alice is scared. It doesn't say the sentence, Alice is scared. It's got lots of clues within it. So I want you to, can you spot any sentences in the text that show Alice is scared? Have a look at what she does. Okay, I'm going to flick it on. And all these parts in blue here, they show us that Alice is scared without actually saying it. So it says, as she looked, blinking through the tears which had begun to stream hopelessly down her face. Well, that shows us that she's clearly very frightened at the minute. Okay, so by describing the character's actions and facial expressions, we can show that fear. She was met with a sight at the top of the staircase, which all but turned her to stone. So this is showing us that the character is freezing to the spot. Okay, and when someone does turn to stone or is frozen to the spot, we know that means that they're suffering from fear. So again, they're really effective ways by describing the character's actions that we can show the character is scared without directly saying Alice was scared. It also says Alice watched numbly. So if you're numb, it means you've got that sort of fear in you and you don't know what to do. She's feeling numb. And then it says her heart was in her mouth and her breath came in sharp, rattling gasps. Again, her actions and the way she is given us as readers, we can quite clearly see how terrified this character is. Okay, and we call that show, not tell. Another really important feature that we need to use in our suspense writing is description. So to build tension and suspense, description should appeal to the reader's senses. I want you to again have a go at another mini activity. Pause this video in a second, and can you look for any description that talks about the sights or sounds and feelings in the texts? Any parts that are to do with describing it? Okay, so what we're referring to here is our senses. Now, we've got see, hear and feel, and touch and smell. The three that you would use most regularly when describing settings, specifically spooky settings, would be what you can see, hear and feel, but you might also refer to what you touch and what you smell. Now, looking at this one here, it says Coston House was as silent as the grave. So that's to do with what you can hear. It's clearly there's not a noise to be heard. And it refers to that later on as well. It says, in this endless quiet. So again, there's no noise here. Alice's eyes search through the darkness, so it's telling us what we can see, and which faded into a more murky gloom. So there's description adjectives used there to describe the setting. She could make out the hallway right in front of her, the door opposite and beyond it, the enormous winding staircase. Again, they're all to do with what she can see. As she looked, blinking through the tears, which had begun to stream hopelessly down her face. Well, that's really to do with what she can feel. Alice watched numbly, so that's again how she feels. And her heart was in her mouth and her breath came in sharp, rattling gasps. So again, that's to do with her and her emotions and how she's feeling. Descending the stairs, one careful, agonizing, creaking step at a time. Creaking is the noise, isn't it? So what you can hear. A hunched silhouette shuffled out from the darkness. That's what you can see. And again, the vocabulary choice there is really effective, isn't it? By saying a hunched silhouette, as in like the shadow, that's much more effective than just explaining exactly what it is. It gives us a clue, it doesn't tell us the answer. And that leads us nicely into the final sort of feature that we'll be looking for in our suspense writing, and that is the really, really carefully considered vocabulary. On the side here it says, instead of writing walked, as a verb, exciting synonyms are used to show the reader exactly how the man was moving. Can you find the description and why is it scary? So I want you to pause the video and look for the bit where it says that it talks about walking, and what phrase does it use instead of just saying something walked. Let me pause the video and see if you can find that one. Okay. So what we're referring to there is at the bottom here where it says descending the stairs one careful, agonizing, creaking step at a time. That is a much more descriptive way of describing the way the person walked, and it's much more considered and carefully chosen, and then the phrase itself gives you a much clearer picture of how this person is walking. And it also uses the verb shuffled. Instead of walking, it shuffles. Well, you can picture somebody shuffling. So when we want to write suspense writing, when we think about those key verbs in our sentences, we need to choose our vocabulary very carefully. And also within that, the describing words in this extract are very interesting and imaginative. Scouring the murky gloom, the enormous winding staircase. So the adjectives are adding detail. Adverbs here. It talks about the tears down her face, but it says the tears which have begun to stream hopelessly down her face. That gives you that feeling of hopelessness. Okay. Rattling gasps, careful, agonizing, creaking, hunched silhouettes. So not just a silhouette, but how is it looking? Well, it's hunched over, so I can begin to picture this person. So the word choices in suspense writing are so important. That's why you cannot write it at a million miles an hour. You need to take your time, have a thesaurus next to you, and think about every single word you use. And they are all the features of suspense writing. If you can do those things well, you could be a really good suspense author. And to summarize what they are, well, it's careful, considered vocabulary, detailed descriptions of the surroundings, exciting synonyms such as shuffled, and description using the senses. What can you see? What can you hear? How do you feel? Big key to success in suspense writing. Don't give everything away. Clues to tantalize the reader, such as a hunched silhouette, but don't give them the exact answer, and build it up. Okay, you want that reader to keep wanting to read on, to find out more, but don't give it all away at the start. As with lots of writing, but particularly with this piece of writing, we want a good variety of sentence types and lengths, short, shocking sentences for effects, but also some longer sentences with subordinate and relative clauses to make the reader wait even longer. They sort of more detailed sentences. And perhaps even, it's not in this extract, we can quickly flip back to that extract. It's a really good example of a mini waggle for suspense writing because it has all those features in. But the one thing it hasn't got actually is those little one-word sentences such as bang or crash or drip, 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 because they can be really effective. Obviously, use of ellipses to create that little pause in writing. And that show not tell idea, her heart was in her mouth. The physical reactions of the character, they're more... they're better ways of creating that sense of fear than just saying a character is scared. All of these skills combined together help you to create a really effective piece of suspense writing, and they'll be our key success for our unit. And it's really important to understand up front what we'll be looking for you through this piece, through this unit of writing. The one more skill I would look to us to use is to integrate dialogue, and we'll talk about dialogue in a bit. Right. Those are the features we'll be using all the way through suspense writing. And we have looked at a short extract, an example of a waggle for building suspense. This lesson is all about exploring it as a reader. So lots of this lesson is to do with reading, and I'm going to read lots to you. That's why the video here will be quite long. And the best way to learn how to be a really good suspense writer is to look at really good examples. So we've looked at one mini example that was really good, and we're going to look at two more. And we're going to use these all the way through our writing journey. You can sit back and relax and listen to me read them through. But as you do listen to me read them, I want you to think about the setting and the character, and think about what happens if you had to summarize that, what actually happens in those extracts. And try and think to yourself, do they use those features that we've just discussed previously? We'll be magpieing and stealing lots of ideas from these waggles all the way through our writing journey. So they're really good examples and completely different examples of suspense writing. One is chapter 1 of Room 13 that we're reading as our class reader, and another one is called Haunted House, which is something that we've written. Right. Okay, so children, this is our first waggle of extended writing to do with suspense writing. This one's called Haunted House. I want you to listen to me read it and think about where, what sort of features it uses and whether you quite enjoy this writing or not. So, the haunted house. Twisted branches covered the outside wall. Cobwebs swamped the door frame. A half-broken door handle was covered in moss. This house was terrifying, truly terrifying. The house itself was small, no bigger than a bungalow. There was a small porchway at the front and a series of Roman glass windows to the sides. The windows themselves were shattered, no longer fit for purpose. But many years ago, I'm sure they were a beautiful sight to behold. Now, though, they just groaned in the wind. There was no light, just darkness, pure black. All of a sudden, one of the window shutters slammed shut. Bang! It's just the wind, I told myself. Petrified, I took a tiny step forwards, wincing as the wooden floorboards beneath me creaked. It was almost as if they were screeching at me, warning me to go away, to head back home. Fiona, my best friend, followed close behind me. I could hear her breathing heavily. I could hear her teeth chattering together. I could sense her panic. Just breathe, I told her. She nodded. A vacant expression was strewn wide across her face. Anxiously, we opened the front door and tiptoed inside. Creak! The sound was piercing. We both stopped dead in our tracks. Breathe, just breathe. The room fell silent again, but my heart was pounding ferociously within my chest. Fiona was weeping now. I felt like I was crying inside, but I had to stay strong. We quickly stepped into the corridor and the door slammed shut behind us. Bang! I'm scared, groaned Fiona, with glass-like tears rolling gently down her cheek. I know you are. I am too, but we've come this far. We can do this, I replied, holding my hand out to comfort her. Can't we just go back? Why do we have to do this? Fiona wept. We can't go back. We need to find out what's beside the door. Come on, we've got to. We've got to know. We can't turn back now, I told her. But I'm so scared, she answered, crying uncontrollably now. I know you are, but you can do this. Believe me, you can. Come on, let's go, I whispered to her, ushering us both forwards. Frightened, we made our way forwards, our eyes now beginning to adjust to the dark. The hallway itself was horrifying. The ceiling was covered in cobwebs and the walls were decayed. The whole place was falling apart. Up ahead was a candlestick holder, but it wasn't lit. The only light came from behind the door at the end of the hallway, the room we were hoping to get to. All of a sudden there was a noise, like somebody was groaning. What was that? Screamed Fiona. Nothing, just the wind. Keep calm, I said, crying inside. We slowly tiptoed down the corridor, brushing the cobwebs out the way. The floor creaked beneath us. Then another noise, but louder this time. It was from behind the door. Oh, what was that? Sobbed Fiona. Then, in that instant, the door flung open. A blinding light lit up the hallway. At that moment, we saw it. Run! Back! Now! Go! I screamed. So that was our first example of a waggle of a piece of suspense writing. And hopefully you can see that within that piece of writing, it utilised lots of the features and skills that we'll be looking for within our writing. For example, there was detailed descriptions of the surroundings. There was careful vocabulary choices. It doesn't give everything away. In fact, even at the end, it says, at that moment we saw it. Well, it doesn't actually explain what it is. It leaves it up to your imagination. There's lots of shorter sentences, one-word sentences, as well as some longer sentences. And hopefully it created that idea of suspense and tension. And what we're going to be doing, we've been using that waggle as an example for us that we can refer to through our writing. I'm now going to read you Another really, really good piece of suspense writing, and it's actually the first chapter from Room 13. And what's really good about Room 13, this chapter, is it includes lots of clues as to what's coming up later in the story. And again, completely different type of writing, but another really good example of suspense writing that we can use in our own writing. Okay, here's Room 13. Room 13 by Robert Swindles, Chapter 1. This is what Fliss dreamed the night before the second year went to Whitby. She was walking on a road high above the sea. It was dark. She was alone. Waves were breaking at the foots of the cliffs to her left, and further out the moonlight made a silver path on the water. In front of her was a house. It was a tall house looming blackly against the sky. There were many windows, all of them dark. Fliss was afraid. She didn't want to go inside the house. She didn't even want to walk past. But she had no control over her feet. They seemed to be going inside by themselves, forcing her on. She came to a gate. It was made of iron worked into curly patterns. Near the top was a bit that was supposed to be a bird in flight, a seagull perhaps. But the gate had been painted black, and the paint had run and hardened into little stalactites along the bird's wings, making it look like a bat. The gate opened by itself, and as she went through, Fliss heard a voice that whispered, "The gate of fate." She was drawn along a short pathway and up some stone steps to the front door, which also opened by itself. "The keep of sleep," whispered the voice. The door closed silently behind her. Moonlight shone coldly through a stained glass panel into a gloomy hallway. At the far end were steps that went up into blackness. She didn't want to climb that stairway, but her feet drew her along the hallway and up. She came to a landing with doors. The stairs took a turn and went on up. As Fliss climbed, it grew colder. There was another landing, more doors, and another turn in the stair. Upward to a third landing, then a fourth, and then there were no more stairs. She was at the top of the house. There were 4 doors, each with a number. 10, 11, 12, 13. As she read the numbers, door 13 swung inward with a squeal. "No," she whispered, but it was no use. Her feet carried her over the threshold, and the voice hissed, "The room of doom." In the room was a table. On the table stood a long, pale box. Fliss thought she knew what it was. It filled her with horror, and she whimpered helplessly as her feet drew her towards it. When she was close, she saw a shape in the box, and there was a smell like damp earth. When she was very close, the voice whispered, "The bed of dread." And then the shape sat up and reached out for her, and she screamed. Her screams woke her, and she lay damp and trembling in her bed. Her mother came in and switched on the light and looked down at her. "What is it, Felicity? I thought I heard you scream." Fliss nodded. "I had a dream, Mom, a nightmare." Poor Fliss. Her mother sat down on the bed and stroked her hair. "It's all the excitement, I expect. Thinking about going away tomorrow," she smiled. Try to go back to sleep, dear. You've had a long day ahead of you." Fliss clutched her mother's arms. "I don't want to go, Mom." "What?" "I don't want to go. I want out of the trip." "But why? Not to recover silly dreams, surely." "Oh yes, I suppose so, Mum. It was about Whitby, I think. A house by the sea." "A house?" "Yes," she shivered, remembering. "I was in this house and something horrible was after me. Can I drop out, Mom?" Her mother sighed. "I suppose you could, Felicity, if you're as upset as all that. I could ring Mrs. Evans first thing, tell her not to expect you, but you might feel differently in the morning," she smiled. "Daylight makes us forget our dreams, or else they seem funny, even the scary ones. Let's decide in the morning, eh?" Fliss smiled wanly. Okay. She knew she wouldn't forget her dream, and it would never seem funny. But it was all right. She was in control of her feet. She wiggled them under the covers to make sure, and they weren't going to take her anywhere she didn't want to go. So, it's a completely different style of suspense writing, but many of the features of suspense writing in Room 13, Chapter 1, are the same sorts of features that we would use in our writing, and particularly the opening, where there's lots of description about the moonlight shining coldly through a stained glass panel into a gloomy hallway. At the far end were stairs that went up into blackness, and all those phrases. There's a good variation of sentence types as well. And the other thing that's really good about that opening to chapter 30, to room 13, chapter 1, is it doesn't really give much away. It talks about it all being a dream, but you get the idea that this dream might come real. So what we've got there are two really fantastic examples of suspense writing, and we're going to use those all the way through our unit of work. Now, what I'd like you to do for your activity today is obviously listen to me read a lot, and we've gone through all the features of suspense writing. And moving forwards now, I want you to think about how you can use those examples to assist you with your writing in the future. So your task is to gather words or phrases from each text that you can magpie or steal for your writing later in this unit. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do one of my favourite things as an author, is we're going to steal other people's writing. And what you need to do is you need to go through and read each extract. They're in teams. Read them again and choose at least 10 phrases or sentences, so not just one word, but phrases or sentences that you think are really effective, and phrases or sentences that you could use or magpie or steal in your own writing. You must pick at least 10 from each one, so 20 in total. And they're going to be the sorts of phrases or sentences that you can use or modify in the future for your writing. And it says there, choose the language, phrases that you think are the most effective and you would like to magpie for your own writing. In terms of how you set it out, I'm going to say as year 6, I'm not going to tie you down to you must do it like this or must do it like that. And I say you can set it out how you like. And I've put an example there. You could just do it as a mind map. So over here I've drawn room 13 on one side, and I've gathered a couple of phrases: looming blackly against the sky, a voice that whispered. And then the other side you could have the haunted house, a half broken door handle was covered in moss. That is one way of setting it out. It might be that you just put subheadings and bullet point the 10 phrases or sentences underneath. It's completely up to you how you set it out, as long as you gather the phrases. Please keep it neat and tidy, whatever you do. Okay, take pride in your work. It's going to your home learning book, so it needs to be set out neatly. And what's really, really important for activities like this, where we're magpieing and stealing, is we need to use the correct spellings. This is very important. When you copy or steal a phrase, you must correctly spell it onto your sheet. This is going to be kind of your word map that you can use all the way through your writing. A minimum of 10 from each side, but please feel free to do more. If you'd also like to use some of the phrases from the first extract, the mini waggle we did, please feel you could do a third one as well. So that's up to you. The more you gather at this stage, the start of the writing journey, the better, really. As a stretch activity for some of you, if you'd like to do this, an extra thing as well. We've read 2 different extracts today, room 13, chapter 1, and the haunted house. Have you got a preference to which one you prefer, and why? And what I'd like to do, it's a bit like one of those comprehension questions. Can you justify your answer? So if you say you prefer room 13, chapter 1, can you give me a reason why, and maybe reference some of those features of suspense writing that we alluded to earlier on? Or if you likewise, if you say you prefer the haunted house, why do you prefer the haunted house, and why? The key thing there is to write in full sentences justifying your answer. Okay, year 6, that's the task. I hope it all makes sense, and I hope you're very clear now on the features of suspense writing that we'll be using all the way through this writing journey. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'll see you later. Bye.